Jake Paul is getting way more hate than I think he truly deserves. I feel like there is currently a position around Jake Paul where people look at him and he's different. He does things his way. He doesn't do it the traditional way. And a lot of people are having their feathers ruffled a little bit with that one. And I just ask, why don't you just open your eyes and realize that, listen, maybe what he's doing is actually good for the sport of boxing. No, does he deserve to be ranked in the top 15? Absolutely not. He is nowhere near a world level contender. Anything, and of course, he's obviously not ready for no world championship fights. That is a disgrace, but you can't necessarily blame Jake Paul for getting those opportunities. You can blame the commissioning body that's going to set himself up for that, but you can't blame Jake Paul for that. When I look at Jake Paul, I realize this. You can say what you want to say about Jake Paul. Is what Jake Paul does, is it sometimes annoying? Is it sometimes different? Is it sometimes weird? Sure. But let's look at the greater picture right now. Boxing as a whole, if we go back 2 or 3 years ago, boxing was struggling drastically. It was in dire position, specifically in the United States of America. And in comes these celebrity boxers, specifically Jake Paul. And all I see right now is so many viewers coming out. I see record numbers of gates being set in out stadiums. I see some of the biggest fights, including what happened with Mike Tyson, happening last year. Yes, they're controversial. Yes, the Mike Tyson fight should never have happened. But what you cannot deny is the fact that there is a large audience now grasping onto boxing in some capacity. That right there is good for the sport. And you cannot deny that. The more eyes, the better. You know, there's a common thread or a common quote, I should say, that people talk about. Good or bad publicity is still good publicity. When you get your name talked about, it's good. And when Jake Paul fights, all of a sudden, we have a large audience grasping towards boxing. So yes, go ahead and say what you want to say about Jake Paul, the way he handles business, what he does. But let's look at the large picture right now. More eyes are being drawn onto the sport than we have had in a while. And yes, he's done it unorganically. Yes, Jake Paul has gone about this in a very interesting manner. But what you cannot deny is the impact it is having for boxing. And I'm not going to sit up here and just hate on the guy. Yes, a lot of it's frustrating, some of the things he different does. But I'm looking at boxing as a whole, and that's the sport I like. And when I talk about a sport that I like, I want it to have more publicity. And when there's more publicity around the sport, that means there's going to be more money being poured into the sport. And that means that our fighters that we do like watching, that are doing it the way that's more organic and naturally, they're going to be rewarded larger. And that's something that I think we should grasp towards and gravitate at and say, you know what? Maybe this guy's not doing something too bad. He fights 1 to 3 times a year. Is 1, 2 or 3 fights a year really going to make you that upset when he goes out there and does what he does? I don't think so. If you really don't want to watch it, then don't watch it. But what I noticed is that on Saturday night, it was one of the most trending things in the entire world. What I realized on Saturday night is that there was a ton of eyes gravitated towards boxing because Jake Paul was bigger than just boxing. He didn't do it the natural way. Jake Paul has gone about this entire sport and building himself up in a very unusual way through YouTube, through social media. He is the most followed active fighter currently in boxing. He brings in people from all around the world and all different avenues to a sport that they probably would not have watched had it not been for Jake Paul. And maybe not all of them, but there are a percentage of people that are tuning into these Jake Paul fights simply because of Jake Paul. But you know what it does? Is that for that small percentage, they like what they see. They like the sport. They like the undercard. And when they notice those factors, here's what I see happening. They end up saying, you know what? This sport's a little cool. Let's go invest in this. What's the next fight that's going to happen? Is this a fight that I could go watch? And that's how you build new boxing fans. And that would not happen if it were not for Jake Paul. When you have the current boxing format of these pay-per-views and these guys not wanting to fight big fights and so on and so forth, it's very difficult for the sport to get eyes onto the sport. It's very, very difficult. And that is what has come to be to harm the sport of boxing for so many years. And when Jake Paul comes to town, it is bringing new audiences in. No other way we're going to have that happen than with Jake Paul. Nobody has a bigger brand. Nobody has a bigger name. And so, yes, I get it. You can be frustrated with the techniques and the way he's handling business. You can be frustrated specifically with the ranking governing bodies who's going to go and give him the top 15 ranking. I've got no problem with you being upset about that. But what I'm not going to say is that he's bad for the sport. And when people continue to come out here and say Jake Paul is bad for the sport, Jake Paul is impacting it, he is one of the worst things that's happening in the sport, as Virgil Ortiz Jr. pointed out, I think that's absolutely irrational. I think that's absolutely a disgrace. How is that going to be that bad for boxing? Virgil Ortiz says he's one of, if not the worst. Forget the exact quote. Something along the lines of this is either the worst or one of the worst things that's happening in boxing. It's destroying the sport. Absolutely, it's not destroying the sport. It's not. There are so many other things happening in boxing right now that I would say is worse off for the sport of boxing than what's happening right now with what Jake Paul is doing. And that's a fact. And the other aspect I want to bring up real quickly is that when we look at Jake Paul, here's what I love most about it. Yes, the main event on Saturday night sucked. It did. I'm not going to come out here and say, just come out and say this was an amazing fight. No, the main event sucked. It was horrible. And I'm not even going to place the blame on Jake Paul for that. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. went out there and didn't want to throw a single punch. And he got beat up and so on and so forth. He wanted to wait until the final 2 rounds of the fight. It was a horrible main event. Unentertaining, not good fight whatsoever. Jake Paul did his job. He took care of business. He did it. But at the end of the day, it was a pathetic fight. It sucked. That was the main event. All right, end of discussion. Outside of the main event, the undercard for the Jake Paul card was incredible. And if you were to go out here and rank off, this is off the top of my mind, the top, let's say 10 or 15 fight cards of the year, it would possibly be in that top 10 to 15. It really would. You had an incredible card happen. There were multiple upsets. You had a last-second knockout to upset a guy by Julian Rodriguez. You had great fights happening throughout the entirety of this card. You had Holly Holm returning, and she had a great performance in her return back to boxing. There were so many great storylines and moments that happened in this card. It was a good night of boxing outside of the main event. And what's special about that is that those people that are tuning in to go watch Jake Paul, they also got to go learn about Zurdo Ramirez. They also got to go learn more about Holly Holm. They also got to learn about Raul Curiel. They also got to go learn about Julian Rodriguez, so on and so forth. And that, once again, is huge for the sport of boxing. Whether you like it or not, those guys would not have had the platform or the attention had it not been for Most Valuable Promotions and Jake Paul. They made those things happen, and I believe that people need to start giving credit to it. Stop just hating on the game. Stop hating on Jake Paul and realize the greater good that it's doing for the sport of boxing. That's my personal opinion on that. And I think that when we open up to that reality that maybe what's happening right now is not that bad for boxing, we'll start to come together and come together and embrace the situation. And realize, you know what? It's only a couple weekends of the year. Why not allow this to go forth and grow the sport whatever it's going to take? And if you really hate it that much, then just simply do not watch it. But you don't need to hate on the guy. I never understand people that want to hate on fighters. He's doing overall good things for the sport of boxing. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.